So you have a brand new collection, Spinner
Yes.
Black Yarn, which is imminently coming out. So, I mean, to begin with, let's talk about how that collection came about. You know, why a collection? Why now? Why the stories that you chose to put in it?
So I had signed a 4-book deal with Del Rey, but I just want to make sure I have this right. Yes, 3 of them were like going wider with Goblin, A House of Bottom Lake, and On This the Day of the Pig, which I foolishly renamed Pearl.
Mm.
People will be like, why did the publishing house make you change that name? And I'm like, no, shoot, man, that was my bad idea. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking, man. On This Day of the Pig is a great title, and when we went to publish it, or I had kind of suggested this like cover art thing, and I was like, oh, what if it's just called Pearl, whatever? And then they were all into it, you know. And then the minute I got it, I was like, oh no, shoot, I should have left this title, but that's okay. So there were those 3 books and a collection. That was the 4-book deal. Like, and when the collection would come out, who knew, that kind of thing. But I had already begun somewhat on like in like an intentional collection of novellas. It's not quite as intentional as Goblin, which are 6 novellas in the city of Goblin, but Spin and Black Yarn is made up of 5 stories that take place in or near the city of Samhattan, which is about an hour's drive from Goblin. This is all fictional for anyone listening.
Yeah.
And so I was starting to do that. And there was originally 6. The first story of the batch was Daphne. And my intention was to open the collection with like a fastball, just like a straight horror story over the plate. I wanted like no frills, no wild concept. You know, it is a bit of a wild concept, but a monster as panic attack. We're gonna open the novel with like a fastball over the middle. This is horror. You could use that quote. You can use that soundbite later. Ladies and gentlemen, this is horror. And I sent it to them. And Trisha, my editor, wrote me back. She said, "This first novella, this should be our next book." And I was like, "What? Really?" No, because I was afraid of pulling it out of the collection because it felt like the collection was balanced to me. Open with a fastball, then it was kind of like a little curveball, then a knuckleball, whatever. And so, but she explained to me what she was seeing. Like if you just do a little more here, a little more there, and I was like, oh yeah, that is good. So then I rewrote Daphne, and then sent it. And I told you I have the editorial note on the wall from that. But that left Spin a Black Yarn opening with Half the House is Haunted, which is much different story than Daphne. Much, if you ask me, much richer story than Daphne. And then when I read through the collection that way, I was like, oh, I like this better because it wasn't starting off like so deliberate, and it was starting off more shadowy, and it was starting off more suggestive, and I think that Trisha wisely created 2 books that were both better than the one would have been. The centerpiece for me is Igorov, which is the book's closer. That's I don't expect a listener to fully understand this or agree with me doing this, but I wanted to write a story that was like, I'm a fan of like Russian literature, right? But obviously I've only ever read the translations, and oftentimes they're clunky. There's flights of sudden philosophical fancy. There's scenes that don't need to be there at all. And there's something about that variety of the kitchen sink, the Russian literary kitchen sink, that I'm a fan of. And I wanted to write a novella or a short novel that felt that way. And so Igorov was my like opportunity to do this. And so in the rewrites of Igorov, just so the audience knows, Igorov's about 40,000 words. I mean, it's kind of like a Trojan horse, the novel, into the collection. And Igorov takes place in Little Russia, Samhattan. I don't remember exactly what year. What is it, like early 1900s? And it's about, just to throw this out there, it's about a man, like an old terrible man named Igorov, murders a man without realizing he's murdering a triplet. Okay.
Mm.
The two surviving brothers, uh, stage like a faux haunting, pretending to be the ghost of their brother, trying to drive this old crazy person, this old crazy murderous man mad. So I was just thrilled by that idea and thrilled by the concept of this sort of like feel of a Russian translation. But what that means is during the rewrites, there were scenes where I'm like, no, you don't really need this one. Like, no, leave it. Or like, this is clunky, leave it. The character Misha just suddenly goes on a philosophical rant for like 4 pages. Just let him go. And there was something very liberating. It was like, I guess you can argue that Igorov was experimental. So I don't expect a reader to get from it what they're going to get from Argyle. I think Argyle probably is more palatable. I think Half the House is Haunted is certainly more palatable. But Igorov to me is special because I somehow managed to get not just an experimental like story into a collection, but like pretty much a short novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that one, so just as like a writer and in terms of like, it would be like if you as a musician, if you somehow manage to squeak out like an experimental album, and you're not
Yeah.
necessarily known for that or something. There's something like I feel really proud of Igorov. So to me, that's sort of the centerpiece of it. And again, I think Trisha removing Daphne from the mix makes the collection Spin of Black Yarn almost like weightier.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting everything you said because, having read everything, I thought there was no way that you could have ordered the stories any differently. So it's interesting to find out, well, actually, Daphne was at the start to begin with and then was cut. But I mean, it just has such a natural sequence to me. I mean, with how half the house is haunted, you've got echoes of Shirley Jackson, and that lends into a kind of deathbed confession. But
Mm-hmm.
I felt you absolutely needed those 2 to get you ready for the house washer. You can't start with the house washer. You need those 2, for want of a better word, more conventional stories. And honestly, for you to have Jupiter, you absolutely need the house washer. It's like almost a bridge between Argyle and Jupiter is the house washer. And you don't put this kind of what initially starts off as a Russian murder mystery and then turns into a faux haunting. You don't put that anywhere but the end. You
Yeah.
can't. Like imagine if you put I mean you say it's the centerpiece, but imagine if you literally put that in the center. It doesn't work. So
Yeah, but now,
sequentially you
now
just got
I think
the
I did.
perfect order.
I think Trisha ordered it. Also, she ordered that. Yeah, and I remember I felt a little strange that the house washer and the Jupiter drop were next to each other because they're both
Mm.
like I don't say sci-fi, but both
I
sort
mean
of
that
like
yeah, that's sci-fi tangential, I'd say.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And but she was like Igorov has to close it and this and that, and I was like okay, okay. I just went with what she said, and I totally agree. You can't start with the house washer, not only because of the sort of like straight story of it, but because man, those two are unlikable. Holy cow, man.
Yeah.
Doug and Judy, man. Wow. And I mean,
Yeah.
like, Judy is, there's some semblance of like, at least when she's thinking about, I think her friend was named Carla. Was that her
Mm.
friend's name, right? That
Yes.
the tree hugger hippie that thought she
Yeah.
could actually do well in this world. Um, there's something about Judy that strikes me as like she longed or at least can envision having gone a different way. Doug's lost, man. There's that guy, not a prayer. He
Yeah.
didn't have a prayer from the start. Yeah, you can't start with that one. But you could have maybe started with Argyle. But again, removing Daphne, starting with half the house with these kids, I was like, oh
Mm.
yeah, no, this works. This totally works. And again, that's that's the joy of working with a brilliant editor, man. She
Yeah.
arranged the order and she set Daphne on its own island. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of things that I wanna talk about, not only with the stories themselves, but just like all the questions and the little tangents that I get having read them. And I mean, so I mean, first of all, the concept of half a house being haunted, but it not being like an easy division of like, no, it's this half, it's that. It's like, well, no, why can't it be like this object is haunted, that one's not, this one is, that, it doesn't have to be split, up and down or left and right. And is this something, you've thought about in terms of like places that you've been? Have you pondered this idea?
Yeah. Like it struck me once. It's probably out of like anxiety, right? Where it struck me that like when you enter like a hunt, excuse me, when you enter like a haunted house, right, or one that is reported to be haunted, does that mean the whole place?
Mm.
Does that mean just this room? Does that mean just this staircase? Does that mean just this step, not this step, not this step? Does that mean this hall, but not this hall? And that thinking started whatever, it started to become attracted to me. The idea that like I didn't, yes, I've heard this house is haunted, but I don't know. It's not every, because there's something scarier about half of it being haunted to me than the whole thing. Because the whole thing, okay, I'm in it. But what does half mean? Like, am I in it? Am I okay? Is my bedroom in that half? Is my all right? My parents' bedroom, is that in that half? Is the basement in that half? Oh my god, I hope not. Right? Is the outside the half we're talking about? Is the inside? Is the upstairs, the downstairs, the front, the back? So, that concept of I don't know where exactly this is. I don't know where the haunting is. Was like scarier than a full haunting to me, and that was exciting as hell to write.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
don't want
feel.
to. I don't want to give any spoiler away, but her letter at the end was unplanned. Like I didn't really know exactly where this was going the whole time, but you would think after finishing it that was that I had that on my mind the whole time, but I didn't. I didn't think to the very end. I was like, oh, this is what she means by that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I can imagine if you found out like we're going to a half haunted house, it would be more anxiety.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, like that inducing than like a haunted house. Because like you could have one room that is like, okay, that's 100% haunted, but then every room might just have a tiny amount. Like there might be one almost not haunted room, but there is that 1%, and it's like, shit, what if I touch that little 1%?
But what's in this one drawer of this unhaunted room?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then
It's all
it's getting me, thinking about this concept. Well, if it's conceivable to have half a place haunted, then is it also conceivable that there's always 50%, but that 50% can change? So, on Monday, this is the bit, but on Tuesday, this is the part that's haunted. So the haunting can move about, but there will always be 50% will be haunted.
and then you could also look at it as obviously that we got the two Stephanie and Robin. The Stephanie is the
Mm,
sister and Robin is the brother for listeners. And you can argue half the house, meaning Stephanie is haunted and Robin's not. But then again, Robin's the one who ends up telling this whole long story and can't like get it out of his head. Maybe Robin's the one that's haunted and Stephanie's actually not, because she stays in the house her whole life and blah blah blah. In other words, like one of these kids are haunted and one of them are not, and which one is it? And that changes by part to part. My favorite section of that is when he first returns home when their age is like when they're like 40, and he first comes home, and right away she says something like, oh, I only cleaned every other room, and he's like, she's still doing this. She's still talking about every other and
yeah.
half and top and bottom, and like that. That's my favorite moment. He's like, I don't even know if I want to be here, and she's like, oh, let's get a beer, and that whole, and then it starts to be like, hey, I'll give you a tour of the house, but I didn't clean the second floor, but just the first, and it's just like, wow, she's still, and he believes at that moment that she's just totally still screwing with him.
Mm,
Yeah.
And it's
yeah.
like her ability to fuck with him has only gotten better with age. When
Yeah.
she was younger, it was based upon a proximity, a half. but now she's honed that skill to ambiguity. So there's like you don't know if she's fucking with him or not.
Yeah, and
And
also,
I love that.
yeah, and like she's like, there's something frazzled about her. Like she's
Mm-hmm.
still in this freaking house. Like, yeah, yeah. There's a couple like spoilers I don't want to mention, like the pink room and whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
like she's still here. Like that would do. Like really think about that, Bob. Like think about. Do you have a sibling? Do you guys have siblings?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like imagine like heading home to like a house that like you literally like grew up with that thought was haunted or blah blah blah, and then coming back for the first time in a big way at age 40, and like your sister's still living there and
yeah,
still kind of talking about that same stuff. That's intense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
fun.
Yeah. Very much.
Yeah.
yeah. And I love that this story, the format, it was following them literally throughout their life. And so, yeah, the main character in this is the house. It seems like it's Stephanie and Robin at a cursory glance, but it's like, no, it's absolutely the house.
Yeah, I kind of want to go to that house. I kind of
Yeah.
want to like. There's something like I don't want to say hot, but there's something kind of hot about Stephanie to me. I don't know. I don't know. I kind of want to like, kind of want to go. I don't think that often about like my own characters. I'm like, I don't think that way about Mallory. You know what I mean? But something about
Yeah.
Stephanie, like this total like, I just kind of want to like go. I just want to spend an hour there. I just want to go and like have her show me around and then just run.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think as well, it got me thinking about what are like the most innocuous and innocent things that could be haunted. And I mean, I think you mentioned that the idea of a haunted condo is more terrifying than I guess like a traditional like haunted gothic castle or something like that. And so I mean, would you say that something innocent being haunted is perhaps more terrifying than something, I guess, like archetypal or stereotypical? Because, we kind of expect that that might be the haunted part, but what if it's not? What if it's the kettle? What if it's the pillow cover?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think that Paranormal Activity
Mm.
was one of the first that I had seen where it was like that. What is that? Like a little townhouse or a condo? What is that they're living in? I don't even know what that
Right.
is. And
Yeah.
that's not a there's no like spiral staircase.
Mm.
There's no like dark basement. Like this is kind of like a well lit like white paint wall like the room that
Mm-hmm.
you two are in right now. Robin.
Yeah.
And like that idea, there is something a little like if you can find that space in your head to like really think of that place as haunted, it's freakier in a way because it doesn't follow any like pattern that we're used to in terms of horror movies, horror novels, that kind of thing. But meanwhile, Robin did grow up in a big garish home.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
It's kind of like that Anne River Siddons novel, The House Next Door, where the house is literally a brand new house,
Yeah.
and everybody who lives in it goes through a terrible situation in their life that when you have so many families, I think there's like three or four families who move into this house and something tragic happens to every single one of them. And it's the neighbor who's like, there's something wrong with that house. There's a wrongness to it.
Man, so when we moved in, when I was in fifth grade, we moved into a house that's only, I think, 4 miles from where I'm sitting right now, which is weird to me. And my younger brother and I were out in the front yard while the moving trucks, blah, blah, blah. And I swear on my life, a neighbor kid from across the street, his name was Will. He came over and he was either younger than, I think he was younger than us. And he was like, everyone that's moved into this house, they get divorced. That's what he said to us. And I was like, oh, and I remember me and my brother were like, geez, like every couple gets divorced. And my parents got divorced there. Like I remember like years, like it wasn't that long later. I was in fifth grade. So, and then what is fifth grade? 10. So 5 years later, my parents got divorced there. And that is the house where I believe that I saw a ghost.
Well, tell us about that experience.
Yeah.
I don't know. Should I tell this story? I don't. Shit, man.
You should.
Okay, I don't think you're gonna agree with that because this is kind of like this is kind of embarrassing. But I mean, you know what? Screw it. I'll just tell it. So, shit, dude. I don't know if I can do this. Whatever. It's a masturbating story. You guys ready for that?
Oh yeah.
Okay, you're ready. Fine. I'll tell the story. Here we go. So I was probably 14 or something, and everyone in the house had like gone to bed. Wait, first of all, I need to set up the living room for you. So here's the living room. There's like an easy chair. Here's the TV. remember, this is like pre-internet shit. Okay. Here's the TV, and there's a painting, but like whatever, a print behind glass here of like that weird like diner with Elvis and Marilyn Monroe, that stuff. You know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. And I was a kid. This wasn't my decision. This was dad or mom. But here, so the TV's in front of me. The entrance to the living room, one entrance is that way, okay? But there's a second entrance over my shoulder. And this glass reflected the entrance to the living room over my shoulder. Okay. So it's late at night. The whole family goes to bed. I'm waiting for them to all go to bed because I know that USA Up All Night is on and whatever, okay? So I like sneak downstairs and I'm totally gonna whatever, jack off. And I'm like in the little easy chair. Jesus Christ. And I'm like starting to do it a little. And then I like look up and I see someone like in the reflection leaning around the entrance like this, like looking at me. And I was like, oh. And I was like, oh shit, oh shit. And then the thing went like this to me. It goes, that was it. It went. And I was like, oh God, like what just happened? And I like felt like this like chill like up my arms, not up my thing, but up my like entire body, like just like I was wearing like a freaking rubber suit all of a sudden. I was like, wait a minute, who is that? And I like get up and I like whatever, pull my pants up and I run to that entrance thinking it has to be like one of my brothers or something, but it didn't really look like that yet. And I run into the kitchen and I'm like, Derek, that's my older brother's name. I was like, Derek, like, where are you? Blah, blah, blah. And the sound of like the silent house sound, especially when you're like 15. So the thing that, it was like when there was no one down there, it was like dread that I felt and like bolted upstairs, woke my older brother up, told him what happened, told him how like scared I was. To this day, he's like, it wasn't me. I wasn't awake. But the thing that scares me about that story was number one, I never had any like guilt about doing something like that. So it wasn't that. I wasn't like, I'm going to be punished. Like it's like some religious upbringing. I actually thought it was the greatest thing ever. It wasn't just the corner of the eye. It wasn't just like when I was walking by and I saw grandma in the bathroom and I looked. No, it was, I saw something like I can still see it and I reacted to it and it reacted to my reaction. This was like, there was like a sequence of events. I see it. I'm like, oh shit. And it says, that's not the corner of your eye. That's not, I wasn't stoned or drunk and I didn't just wake up. It's not like a lot of ghost stories begin, I just woke up or I got stoned or I was drunk or whatever. No. Why? Very alert, to say the least. And so that was in that house where Will Peppo told me that my parents would get divorced and they did. And a ghost caught me masturbating. So listeners, wow, I can't believe I just told that story. But that's a good ghost story though.
Yeah.
That's creepy.
Yeah. Oh. What are you thinking of?
The reaction of the apparition, whatever it was, that's, I don't know. I can't think of the name of the movie, and the movie's not very good, but it's a girl waves at a figure that's like walking across something, and it waves back to her, and it's creepy as hell. And that's what it reminded me of. And man, when you said it waved like that, man, the hair on my arm stood up. I was like,
Oh,
fucking shit. That's
Yeah, to this day I think about that. I'm like, think about like, so what? Okay, let's just have fun, and let's say for a second it was a ghost. So what was it saying? Like, don't. It was. I guess it would be saying like, no, no, don't worry, right? I guess, or it was saying
yeah.
noise or like whatever. You caught me watching you. Like, what happened there? Like, what? Let's just say for a second that that's all real. I mean, I believe me, I can still, Jesus, I can still see because in that reflect, I can still see it so clearly. The entrance to that room and the hands on the edge and the like that the outline. Well, it wasn't even outline. I could see her face like looking around the corner.
Oh man, that's
I mean, that
creepy
wasn't a
shit right
burglar.
there.
You know what I mean? What the fuck was that, man? Meanwhile,
Fucking
I was watching
being.
Rhonda Up All Night on USA. You know, I can't believe I said that. Sorry. But, but yeah, I mean, look, there wasn't many options back then. You know what I mean? And I was only like 15 years old. You know, so, like, but yeah, that's my go-to.
I don't know, man. When you said there weren't that many options, just remind me of Seinfeld. Glamour, glamour. I'm just like, really?
That's the most Jewish ghost story I've ever heard in my life. I don't know why it is, but it is.
So wow.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah. And every now and then I'll still bring it up to my older brother. I'm like, "You swear to God you weren't," because I mean, but I mean, I know it wasn't. Like, but he's like, "Stop asking me. No, I wasn't me. I didn't catch
Yeah.
you cracking off, dude."
So was
Michael's
was
like,
that the
Michael's
was
like,
that the only kind of ghost-like experience that you've had? Have you had others?
there was another one during anal. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
He's back again. Oh, you caught me peeping. The peeping ghost.
No,
It's watching.
Oh
he's
god.
back again. Yeah, that was my one. That was my one time.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
before that happened, what were your beliefs about ghosts and the supernatural or lack thereof? And
Well,
what are your beliefs today?
I was already reading horror by then.
Mm.
So, there were definitely like freaked out nights in my bedroom, like reading. I have it right here. The first horror novel I ever read, The Face of Fear,
Mm.
Demon Comics, but Brian Coffey, I think was his pen name,
Mm.
and Stephen King, all that like kind of stuff. Pet Cemetery, The Shining, blah blah blah. So I definitely, and I was starting to already watch horror movies by then. So I was definitely already like starting to, you know, we had stupid seances upstairs. That's
Mm.
probably, if this is a movie, that's like a very key moment that I just said that. We had seances upstairs. Who are you? Peeping Tom. He's back
Yeah.
again.
That,
No,
that
stop.
that's how this guy turned up. You summoned the peeping ghost.
We were like, "Do you want to watch?" He's like, "Yes." Um, he was like, I just want to see Rhonda up all night. I'm not looking at you, kid.
Yeah.
Um, so, and now, I don't know. I think that we probably talked about this before, but I'm absolutely the kind of guy who believes in all these things, right? In ghosts and even demons and these kind of things, at least for the duration of the movie, the book,
Mm.
the album, writing the book, and I think that that's sort of like an arrested development that I cherish. And the reason I
Mm.
even call it an arrested development is I think that it's commonly like a young person would be afraid of these kind of things, right? And a lot of like 40-year-olds would not, right? But I actually cherish this. Like just recently, I asked Allison to leave the light on in the bathroom, and she goes, "Never in my wildest dreams I imagined I'd be, dating this like this scared, such a scared man." Like,
Mm.
I'm like, no, no, baby, leave the light on in the bathroom. Thank you. As I'm going to bed. But I cherish that because there's a sort of wonderment to still believing in the possibility of these things. Not to mention the obviously inherent optimism that if a ghost exists, maybe there's more than just this life, right? These are
Mm.
all, in a sense, in a bizarre way, a lot of these horror supernatural elements are very optimistic thoughts.
Yeah.
Because it suggests more.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want to know more, and who doesn't want there to be more? So I think I know that I can believe in them for the duration. Now, if I'm just alone thinking about, these things, I don't know where I land just thinking about them, and in the course of every day. I don't know exactly. Maybe that's why I love reading and watching this stuff so much, is that it keeps that sort of a flame of belief alive.
Yeah. Yeah. And if the peeping ghost can, have some sort of afterlife, then there's hope for all of us.
Is this turning out to be our best episode ever that we've done? We have the whole social media weird stuff, the documentary, but now, wow, I can't believe I told you that ghost story.
I
Wow.
think
Yeah.
I think I think Michael's.
Do not edit that ghost story out. Promise you.
I won't. I won't.
It's gonna be the log line for the episode.
I mean, that's the
There's,
headline.
I mean, there's always something weird that comes up, and of course, as I said off air, the weird thing that came up before was the Jizzly Bear, and of course, you said
I can't even believe this is happening.
you said, well, now I would keep it in if we were to talk about the Jizzly
I
Bear.
think, wow.
So I think you know where we're going. so tell everyone this is a public moment to talk about the Jizzly
Also
Bear.
a masturbation story. Okay. Actually, you know what? I think that this applies. This is good. So I was at a bar one night with James, who is directing a Ben Evans film starring Sky from The Greasy Strangler. I say all that to sort of soften the blow of Jizzly Bear that's coming. And I jokingly said to James, like, "Hey man, we were wasted." I was like, "Where's the weirdest place you ever masturbated?" And then I told him mine, and then he told me that his was in a deer blind. And I was like, "Oh, that's disgusting! Like in a deer blind, like while you were like hunting or something." First of all, you hunt, And second of all, blah blah blah, just through a little, like, what does that mean? Like through a little peephole, And then I was like making a joke about what if like you did that and it shot out through the little window and landed in a bear. And then we were so drunk, we thought it was so funny. And all night we're like, Jizz Bear, And Allison walked up to us and she goes, "I think you guys mean to be saying Jizzly Bear." We were like, oh. And so, I'm a writer and James is a director. And I was like, "Dude, if I write this script, you promise to direct it?" And he was like, "This is like a Faustian deal. This is like strangers on a train. If I kill your girlfriend, will you murder my father? If I write Jizzly Bear, will you direct it?" And he was like, "Yes, sir." Okay. I woke up the next day and I kind of have this like rule of my own where I try to be good on my word, even if like I was drunk. So if I'm drunk and I'm like, "I'm going to write a 1,000-page novel," well, now I got to do it. If I'm drunk and I'm like, "We're going to make a double album," now we got to do it. If I'm drunk and I say to James, "I'm going to write the script for Jizzly Bear and you have to make it." Okay. So 3 days later, just like strangers on a train, James gets a knock at his door, He answers, "There's me. I wrote the script." And he was like, I think he like blanched, He was like, oh no. Oh shit. Because James is like a serious director,
Yeah.
he wants to make movies and shit. And his friend is saying to him this. To put this into context, Bird Box had come out like the month before. So I had written, in a vacuum for like 20 years. I'm in a band writing blah, 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 blah. I finally have like, without question, the most like commercially successful moment of my life. This novel comes out on Echo, HarperCollins. It's even like an esteemed imprint of HarperCollins, right? And like Bird Box, and it's getting all this attention, whatever. And I'm at his front door with like, "I wrote the script for Jizzly Bear. Will you direct it?" And he was like, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, And then so he took it. And after a while, it became very, very obvious that we were putting me and because Allison was all on board on this. Me, Allison, and my friend Eric were kind of putting James in a weird spot, asking him to direct this movie. So finally, we were like, "Just don't worry. I'm gonna direct it. I'm gonna make this. Don't worry about it. We love you, but we are going to make this movie." I brought the script around to a bunch of comedians, like comedy troupes in the Detroit area. And essentially, it's a hunter that accidentally impregnates a bear, and then the spawn comes back and kills everyone. Okay. So every comedy troupe is like, no, 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 no. Yeah, we can't do this. We can't do this. And one day, Eric and I were hanging out at a bar, and Eric said to me, he's like, Allison does like a gazillion faces. Has she ever been like a dude? And I was like, well, yeah, I don't, maybe. And then he's like, why doesn't Allison play the guy? And it changed everything because now there was something so weirdly meta about this. Now it was like Alice, so it's like a woman playing the hunter man that whacks off into the bear, and then she also plays the bear like child and all this like stuff. And I wrote her, I'm like, are you do you have any pictures of you as like a dude, like Eric saying maybe you should star in this? She doesn't respond. She doesn't respond. Eric and I drive home, and when we got home, Allison walked out the front door dressed up as this dude with this awesome short black hair and this mustache, and she's like, "Hey guys, like how you doing?" And she was like, ready, like we were like, "Oh my god, we're making this movie." Everyone in town was involved, like numerous other friends and camera people, and it turned into like I imagine sort of like what a trauma an early trauma film must have felt like, just like this is the most fucked up thing. And I think what it was, I think what Jizzly Bear was for me, not to get like too heavy, but I think I almost needed it. Like I'm like a guy that was like living on floors for 20 years in a band that's playing for 20 people a night and having the time of his life, drinking too much with friends, writing 14 novels for no reason, suddenly have this commercial release. And I feel like I needed to like remind myself or something. I need to be like, Psh, hey, you think you're Mr. Clean now? All right, let's go make Jizzly Bear. Yeah. So that movie, by the way, that movie is on what's it called? Vimeo or Vimeo?
Mm,
Vimeo, right?
Vimeo, yeah.
That movie is on Vimeo. Anyone listening, go watch it. You just Google it, or I mean, you just look it up on Vimeo. You can just watch it. It's just sitting there.
We can put a link to it in the show notes if you want. Or do
Wow,
you?
this is really turning in. This is a real episode we have going. This is a real episode we got going here right now.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what your publishers would think because this second part right here, this is the I'm just laughing imagining because this is the spinner black yarn part, and it's like your publisher sits down to listen, and it's like that it begins innocently enough. Okay, like we spoke about the story order, we complimented it. Oh, everyone's having a good time. Oh no, there's a masturbating and ghost story. Oh shit, why the hell did the host segue into the Jizzly Bear? Why did he not bring it back to the second story in the collection?
Okay,
But
let me tell you, you two are going to watch that movie and you are going to fall in love with Allison.
you
Allison,
do. I've seen the
oh, you what?
movie. I what when you mentioned it last time. Yeah, like I watched it within days, and then I also sent it to my friend who's nothing to do with the horror community, and was like, "You need to watch this movie." So yeah, I have seen it. It is. Oh, it is something.
Wow. Yeah, Allison. Oh my God. And so every weekend, like we filmed and she was dressed up as Sam every weekend. And I knew at the last weekend that we were driving to this, like these woods to film. If you remember when the forest starts pooing on everybody, remember that
Yeah.
scene? And when the trees start pulling on everyone. And Allison, I looked over at her. I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna miss this guy. You know, I started to feel like sad. I'm like, I'm gonna miss Sam. You know, I mean, she was that dude for like every weekend for like a year. You know, yeah. We never
I
made out
know.
with Sam. I kind of still feel like that was like a missed opportunity somehow. But we never did it. You'd think that we would have just once. We never did.
I mean, maybe she can, like, dress up as Sam for the 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
Give you your night with Sam. I mean, you didn't say you wanted a night. You just said a kiss. I've turned it into something
You're
entirely
taking it
different.
even further than it needs to go.
Yeah, I could write her right now, like, "Hello, honey. Could you come into the office dressed as Sam?" No, probably take her like hours to get ready. But yeah, no, but I would have thought like just once, one kiss or nothing really. No.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Well, I suppose, and much to your publisher's pleasure, we should probably move back to the collection, and so we should jump into Argyle, which is a guy on his deathbed surrounded by his family makes quite the confession and talks about his real nature. And I love, like, you know, all of your stories, really, you do not bury the lead. You jump straight into things. You say in the first sentence that he's about to tell his family the truth about himself, and oh boy, does he do just that.
I had a friend. I can't remember exactly what we were talking about. It's something like Dahmer or something like that. And he said something like, thank God I wasn't born that way. Thank God I'm not into that. Thank God something of that nature."
Mm,
And it struck me like, what a weird way of looking at that, as opposed to, or what a great way, actually, of looking at that, as opposed to being this monster, which I'm not being empathetic necessarily to like a serial killer, or I understand abuse and all this shit leads up, but that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that it's very natural to respond to a monstrous person by saying, "What a monster." And my friend was like, "Thank God I'm not wired that way." And I
mm,
started thinking about, what if you were and didn't do anything about it? So
mm,
like that to me, that there's like extreme nobility in that, right? There's like, that's like you pulled off like the feat of a lifetime if you wanted to do something terrible like that, but you didn't. See, none of the three of us want to do that, and that doesn't mean us not doing it is meaningless. I'm glad none of us do it. But if we wanted to do that, like legitimately wanted to do that and didn't do that, inherently there is something so noble. And so, meanwhile, here's his father on his deathbed saying to his two kids, his wife, his boss, family, friends, and he's flat out saying, like, I wanted to hurt all of you. I wanted to kill all of you. I followed people around town. I came this close and this close. And he keeps mentioning maybe that one time, maybe that one time, counts as I did something wrong, which kind of keeps you, the reader, the whole time
mm,
like, well, what is that one time, Sean? And it also gave me a chance, real fast, to start to interconnect all of the Samhattan stories, because the first
mm,
Samhattan story I ever wrote was for Max Booth. It was the Givens Censor Board, about, real fast, about a cemetery with this new like invention where if you buried someone alive, life would be detected and a little sensor on their plot would start blinking. And a serial killer named Randy Scott was buried in the Samhattan Cemetery that day. And that night, the teenage freaking Cheeto eating guy sees Randy Scott's light blinking, and he's
mm,
like, what would you do if you saw if you realized that like a serial killer had been buried alive? Would you dig him up? And so that gave me, in Argyle, our man Sean meets up with Randy Scott's. And it gave me, then I started to see sort of like whatever. I think Daphne's mentioned. Oh, Ben Evans is definitely mentioned in that
mm,
book as well. And it started to be fun for me to sort of like make connections of all the stories. And Argyle feels like this first, like whereas Camp was that for me in Goblin, where he's starting to like combine stories.
mm.
Argyle was that for me in this one.
Yeah, yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
of course you referenced Goblin as well in Argyle very briefly. There's all sorts of references, and I mean, I, I wondered too. I mean, where did Sam Hatton come from, and when did you know that was going to be a recurring theme in your stories?
I need, because Goblin to me is such a colorful place, like literally populated by obsessives. I think if you went down any block in Goblin and went into any
Mm,
store, there would be a novella worthy story of an obsessive
mm,
that runs the flower shop, of an obsessive that runs the coffee shop, the obsessive that owns the bookstore, the obsessive copy, whatever it might be. And I wanted a town to like return to, whatever. Hold on, my dog. Can you hear my dog? It started to sound like a werewolf.
I can, yeah.
Follow. Hold on, buddy. I love you. Don't turn into a werewolf. Hold on. I'll be right there. All right. She's a really smart dog. Okay, buddy? What if you heard her go, yep?
The funny thing is, was when you said "all right, buddy," someone like next door said something as if acknowledging. So it was almost like I got a
That
reply.
masturbating ghost story is it's got under your skin. Oh, gross. That doesn't sound right. But anyways,
Oh, well, it didn't when you drew attention to it.
so so Samhattan gave me a little bit more palatable. Like I want to write like a Return to Goblin. I think that's what it is.
Mm,
I do want to write that. But Samhattan gave me like a place to go that everything doesn't have to be so heightened, so colorful, so obsessive. So it's like it's sort of
mm.
like almost drab, white in stone, sort of like industrial Midwest city, gray skies. Like there's some stuff there. There's the candy shop that in Daphne, and like there's some stuff, but not like Goblin. Goblin's like so colorful, and so Samhattan was an opportunity to write about maybe like colder subjects, whereas Camp is scared of being scared to death. Samhattan has like a serial killer.
So there's one bit in Argyle that's like really stuck with me, and like I also like wonder like I'm not even 100% sure what happened, and I have like various theories, but because I don't want to spoil it for people, it involves a stove,
Oh,
and it
I
involves
right.
yeah, a person on the stove, and it's never explicitly stated exactly how a stove and something or someone else happened to be on the stove, and there's like about 3 or 4
Oh, yeah.
theories as to what happened there, but it's
Mhm.
that's such a wild moment, and I'm not sure if this is like terrible listening for people that it's like I'm like very subtly talking in coded terms about a moment in a book that isn't out for people to read yet. So great fucking podcasting there.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, yeah. I don't think I'm going to say a word about it. Yeah, I knew that I was like in my head. I was like, he's talking about the stove. Yeah.
Mm.
Um. Ethel, though, we can talk about her for a second.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
what a kind of masterful class in foreshadowing as well. Like us as seasoned readers and storytellers, we knew that Ethel was going to come back at some point, but like the fun is in the journey and seeing, okay, how is Ethel gonna tie into all of this?
I think that there's a big difference. It wouldn't be the angel devil on your shoulder thing, but
Mm,
Ethel here and Argyle here in Sean's life, right? And for
mm,
listeners, Ethel is Sean's sister. And as a reminder, Sean is confessing that he is a serial killer who never killed. Ethel is a sister who is aware of these urges in him, witnessed these urges in him, witnessed these close calls in him, and
mm,
more. Argyle, though, is a friend that knew what he was from
mm,
that. What's the right word? What's the right word for that? Like discovered for herself, intimated
mm,
through his personality that something was up. And I think that Argyle gives us a window into like how like a person with any sort of sense of like like powers of observation would have like spotted this in him. Ethel literally was like following him and seeing it. Argyle was more like sun's up with this guy in that moment when they're in the woods, and she's like, why don't we
mm,
draw like our greatest fantasy? Why don't we draw? And she draws a picture of herself as a business owner, as a CEO,
mm.
all that. And then he hands her the most messed up drawing you can imagine. And there's a sense there in that moment that Argyle's like, that's what I expected. And so I think that it was, or I know it was fun to play with, because let's say he's not a serial killer, just for the sake of this, like whatever he is, it was fun to play with the idea of someone who was raised with you and knows you that way, but then also someone who had a limited experience with you, but was able to recognize it right away, and even kind of warned you, like on that
Mm,
drive from that bar back to Samhattan. She's like warning him, essentially, like you got a long road ahead of you, that stuff. Um, Argyle became, and that's essentially why she became the title character. she became almost sort of like this truth prism for me.
Mm.
Like the way she saw him, that was Sean. Whereas Ethel
Mm.
seemed a little more her view of her brother and her obviously the stove scene, her view of her brother and all that seems more like a frantic, harried, frustrated, um, helicopter parent,
Mm.
like a million, like a family member. And it kind of like said to me or underscored to me, which I love my family and my siblings, but underscored to me that oftentimes even a family member is like a little too close to the truth, and an
Mm.
outsider with powers of observation can see it for exactly what it is. And I think that Argyle is that prism in that book or in that novella.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
like it's got to be up there with my favorite stories of yours, and particularly because I love minimalist setting. I love dialogue heavy. So then this story is essentially a conversation,
Yeah,
and it's
no
just
no
so
chapter break in that one.
no,
Yeah,
no, and I mean. I feel of all the stories in the book as well, this would be the easiest to make into a film. I mean, it's very minimal in terms of what would be required, and I hope that it does get made into one.
there is a director attached, um, and but we because of this writer strike,
Yeah,
um, we had to like stop talking about it essentially because this director also writes, and
yeah,
so we weren't able to talk about like any vision of anything. You know what I mean? Like I could,
mm,
and rightfully so. I don't want to. I don't want to like cross that line
yeah,
or
yeah,
make
yeah,
right. So it was kind of like it had to sort of stop with like like it's interesting right now. Those business meetings during this writer strike are interesting because they're all a
mm,
bit neutered, and like that's fine, but they are, which is like there's a sense of like if you're talking to a director writer, well, you can't talk about the writing, so the director calls and says, "I love this novella," and you're like, "Thanks," and you can't really talk about anything else.
yeah,
Meet and you did make contact, and you're like, "I love horror." You love horror. You liked Argyle. That kind of thing. But
mm,
we were able to talk to him a little bit more than that before, like whatever. This is all happening. You get what I'm saying? So, and yeah, he is attached to direct Argyle, and I don't know. We'll see. I agree. I think that that's probably the easiest to adapt. Although half the House is Haunted might also
mm,
be the hardest would be Igorov for sure, and to me, but that includes freaking Jupiter, which by the way, the Jupiter drop is with Universal
mm,
and with Monkey Paw producing, and I also have not announced that before. This is a doozy. This episode is a doozy, man. We got announcements. We got more. You guys, we got we had announcements. We got what's it called? You guys now can go watch my directorial debut, and we even got a ghost stories. My computer is dying. I just put it in. Okay,
yeah,
but yeah. So the Jupiter drop is. I've already read the script and everything. Um, and Argyle, there's some traction, but Igorov, that's my baby.
yeah,
That is my baby.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we'll talk properly about. We will talk properly about Igorov next time. I probably shouldn't. I want to talk about it now, but I gotta save that. I gotta save that.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we're just gonna jump into it. But
It's
yeah,
probably
Yeah.
wisest for like all three of us. Like, because even if we get started right now, like yeah, it's probably wisest. But
yeah,
I'm having a blast
yeah.
talking to you guys, and don't
Hmm.
not doing anything else. But yeah,
The
Nah,
the one thing, if like the the half the house is haunted felt very much, it had that whimsy of, Shirley Jackson. You know,
mm,
the thing about Argyle that got me is that it had this feeling, and I know this is going to sound like it's coming from left field, but it's really not if you think about it. It had this feeling of something that was written by Peter Straub. especially his shorter works. But if they were written, from basically, uh, from like Coco, it, because you had these long conversations, and a lot of his work was not. It was more, I guess, exposition. But Coco is actually a very dialogue heavy book. There's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of that's mingled in with inner monologue, stuff like that. And while I was reading, I was like, man, this reminds me of Straub. And maybe I might be the only person in the world who felt that, but I mean that as a compliment.
Oh
I
my
was just
God.
like,
Are you kidding me?
it was really, and parts of it were very kind of funny in a dark way. uh like his when someone would come up and see Sean, he was on his deathbed, and he's like, basically, I thought about getting a file nail and sticking it into your gut, and I can just hear this old guy, and I just imagine Bruce Dern, you know
Oh, that's great.
just with hair slicked back, and and just let me go on. You don't understand, how I felt. And I was like, man, dude, this is like some massive heavy imagery, and it was great. It was fucking
Man,
great.
Bob, thank you so much. And I may want to ask you to use that as a blurb or something for you to say half the house is haunted is Shirley Jackson-esque, and then for Argyle to be Peter Straub-esque. Like I'm like, if you don't mind, I may want to like actually just use that on the book.
Well, I'll have to try to write it up a little bit more eloquently than my
Okay.
Southeast Texas pronunciation would say. But
Okay.
yeah,
All right. I mean, okay, if you would, that would be the honor. I would be extremely honored because
yeah.
that is freaking. Thank you for saying that.
All right. You're welcome.
Um, yeah, that is also one of the beauties of the novella, right? Is that you can look up and be like, there were no chapter breaks, but you know what? That's okay. It's like
Hmm.
20,000 words, and I think it moves and that kind of thing. And that's that
Hmm.
beautiful sort of middle ground for the writer where you can kind of get away with. And in Igorov, we talked about the experimental elements before. Like, you can kind of get away with some of these things in a novella that are a little less abrasive or something that might be like in a novel. Now,
Hmm.
now I want to write a novel with no chapter breaks. That
Yeah.
sounds because I'll see people be like, I like short chapters, and that makes me want to write like 1,000-page chapter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile, I like
Hmm.
short chapters too.
Hmm.
What are
Well,
we? What are we? Not snorting whiskey anymore? I mean,
I think that might be the note to go out on for this episode.
well, okay. One more thing. One more thing about Argyle, and then
Okay, oh, we're taking it home. We're
one more
taking it
thing about
home.
Argyle is that the birds of a feather element. Again, the Randy Scott's like meeting
Mm,
where like bus drivers nod to each other. I think people that own Jeeps like wave to each other or something like that. That kind of thing. And the idea that game recognizes game or a vampire recognizes a vampire, that kind of thing, or an
mm,
addict. I liked that element. That was fun to write about because
Hmm.
it was almost like being part of like a subculture.
mm,
That Sean was like like trying to grapple with. So
mm,
there's some identity there, which you could like equate with sexuality. You could equate with lifestyle. You could equate with a million different things. That either way, it's private to you until someone else who is existing on the same plane recognizes it in you. And that element of it was like a lot of fun to write. Randy's a jerk, but it was fun to have that acknowledgement like section of it. It was fun. It was thrilling to write that, like that stretch of it.
mm.
Hmm.
Yeah.